Chris Collinsworth will be on the call with Mike Tirico on Sunday night, and Chris joins us on the program. How often do you find yourself rooting for one of the teams to win the previous week if they're going to be on Sunday night? Like, were you a Falcons fan against the Eagles?
That's a dirty question right off the bat. The answer is yes.
Okay.
I do have to say, in life, we all kind of cheer for what's best for our company and our product. And an 0-2 Falcons team going home, and nobody really too excited and playing the Chiefs. But now, after that thing the other night, that was really something. That was some comeback. Those two teams running the ball so well up and down the field, and then all of a sudden Cousins just went crazy. I mean, it looked so hard to throw the ball on several occasions during the course of that game, and then it just exploded in 4 or 5 plays, and that was exciting, and they're an interesting team because they can run it so well. Bijan Robinson is just so good. I mean, this sucker can not only does he have those one-step cuts and speed to get the outside zone, they run outside zone about as well as teams that I've seen this season. And Philadelphia, had a good running game going too. But yeah, that was fun.
When it comes to the Hall of Fame, are you more of a stats guy or the eye test that somebody's a Hall of Famer?
You know, if I've seen them or I've played against them, that's an easy question, right? I mean, that's an easy one for me. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm studying the tape of Atlanta the other night, and Chris Lindstrom's their right guard. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares. But I'm watching him, and for the whole first half, Chris Lindstrom is cutting the inside backer for the Eagles, and they're breaking off these big runs. And then you start to notice that, like, no other guard sort of gets left alone to have to block one-on-one and in pass protection. Chris Lindstrom does almost every time. So he gave up a sack, he gave up a quick pressure. There were a couple other things. But if you said who was the best player you saw on the field for Atlanta, Bijan would have been close, but Chris Lindstrom would have been the other. Now, his stat line is going to say he gave up a sack and he gave up a quick pressure that cost him a play. But the where they put him in the game and what they force him to do against those big defensive tackles of the Eagles, I thought was the most impressive. So I don't know if that answers the question, but if I've seen it, I feel better about it than I would just looking at stats.
But, Luke Kuechly's a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Terrell Suggs, Hall of Famer. Yeah. Marshawn Lynch, Hall of Famer?
No doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt.
Okay, are any of those guys first ballot Hall of Famers? Because this is their first year being nominated. Is Kuechly a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yes. I think for my money, all three of those guys.
First
I thought
ballot.
they were not that it's too hard for me to understand, either a guy is or he isn't.
I know.
You know what I mean, Dan? It's like if he's good enough to be in the Hall of Fame, then he should be in the Hall of Fame in the first ballot. And maybe we shouldn't even be considering people beyond that. I don't know. But it's like, is it a Hall of Fame? Is this the greatest players? Are these the greatest of all time? And Marshawn Lynch was an absolute beast. Suggs, I mean, how many times did I see him, break the nose of Ben Roethlisberger? And Kuechly is just a no-brainer. I think he kind of changed the position, not just with the way that he tackled and played in the run game, but with the way he played in coverage. He was one of the great cover linebackers that I've seen. So, from those are all my eye test. Those three guys were great.
All right, is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I think that's harder, because it is. I've seen Eli have off years. I've seen Eli, have spectacular years. Eli is the guy that when he's on, It's sort of like the Manning show in some ways. It's like when Eli's funny and entertaining, like he can carry the whole thing. And Eli in those 2 Super Bowl years could not have been any better. I mean, it was stunning, some of the games that he came away with. The natural statistics of Eli Manning are going to be a tough comparison against some other people. But 2 Super Bowls is 2 Super Bowls, and either we're in or we're out on the only thing that matters is quarterbacks winning Super Bowls. I'll let me pile on how many stats for my guy Kenny Anderson
Oh, I agree.
to be in the Hall of Fame, 4-time passing champion. We go to the Super Bowl. We suck when we in the first half of that game, and we cost Kenny what should have been a Super Bowl championship. He played great. There was nothing Kenny did wrong in that game, and yet that's going to be the standard. But if that's a standard, then all right, then Eli's definitely in.
Talking to Cris Collinsworth. He'll be on the call Sunday night on NBC and Peacock, Chiefs and the Falcons. What have you noticed with the Jets so far, their offense with Aaron Rodgers? What do they have and what are they missing?
Well, the first thing that came up is when I first saw Aaron in camp, I thought he was still limping, that whatever it was. And I go, uh-oh, that's because his mobility was a big part of what he did. I always thought he was one of the toughest guys to try and rush for against because he innately knew where that was. So there's 6 places you can run if you're the quarterback and they rush 4. And I mean, he found it friggin' every time, so he could step up and make throws and do that. So I think Aaron Rodgers is not yet where he's going to be this year. And with the way they play defense and the improvements and the health on the offensive line, you hope that Tyron Smith can stay healthy. You hope that Morgan Moses and Barrett Tucker and all those guys stay healthy. And they can run the football. With Brees Hall and what's the kid's name? Breland Allen, something like that. I thought they put on a show. So yeah, I'm kind of bullish on the Jets because of the way they play defense, and I think Aaron Rodgers is just getting started. To me, this is like when I played, where we were for opening day. We had played in 2 or 3 preseason games. We were kind of ready to go. I don't care what anybody says about practice and the scrimmages and all that stuff preseason. You have to play in a game. You have to, when people are out there trying to kill you, you have to play in a game to get a feel for playing in the NFL. And I mean, it's every year it startles me. When I see the first game that we call, it just is startling how violent and how fast the game is after you've been watching the preseason games. But I do think you'll get there. The other thing I really believe, Dan, is that I don't pay attention until we get to October. I really don't. I think the NFL does a great job of matching up really good teams against really good teams early. So we get early losses out of those teams that haven't been so good against teams that haven't been so good. And so we get some cheap wins early. And so you don't know. And the other part of it is coaches need tape to coach. So the elite coaches can take what their guys have done in a game and that game film and coach them to take them to a level that lesser coaches cannot, if that makes sense.
We're 2 weeks in, passing touchdowns are way down. Way down. Why?
Well, I think it's part of the reason you're seeing everybody running the ball so well. It has really become the thing in the NFL, and it started, many, many years ago. But if there was always an argument, everybody says, oh, you got to run the ball to win games. You got to run the ball. Almost every defensive coordinator I've talked to, they go, I don't give a damn how many yards they run for. They're not going to beat me running for 150 yards. They're going to beat me because they had 3 plays that went for 50 over my head. And that's really where the game has evolved. So now, because of Mahomes, and we saw everybody went to the 2 deep safeties and they're just sitting there. And so now these safeties are getting a little bit better, and the slot players in particular are getting better at sort of playing that wide receiver screen, coming back in and supporting the run game. The safeties know how to get up and down, but it's really hard to get a ball over the top of these defenses anymore. So you don't get cheap points. You don't get fast points the way that you did. And so really the game is always the ebb and flow of it. Right now, that ebb or flow or whatever it is the run game. And you're seeing these guys look spectacular running the ball. It's because they don't have enough guys to stop it in the box.
I've been saying for years, I don't know why somebody doesn't be counterintuitive and say, we're going to build our team that you have to stop us. That we're not going to be like every other team. Everybody has, fast edge rushers. Your defensive players are a little smaller. Everybody wants the passing game. What if we just do what Jim Harbaugh is doing with the Chargers? We're going to have a great offensive line. We're going to run the ball, control the clock, and we're going to put pressure on you to score points. And maybe we're seeing that. Maybe this is an aberration, but I would have an offense that was different. I wouldn't try to. We can't be the Chiefs, so don't try to be the Chiefs. Be something that can beat the Chiefs differently.
Yeah, the opening statement that you made there, I am 1,000% on board. If you put me in charge of any football team tomorrow, I would start scouting offensive linemen. I watched Atlanta, I watched Philadelphia, you watch the interior three for Kansas City, when quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts sat in the pocket a few times in that game the other night. And I know Atlanta didn't draft an edge player, and maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. But I'm just watching Jalen just stand there, and you got NFL caliber receivers out there running around and a bunch of defensive backs trying to figure out which way they're going. And then you got a quarterback that can take off and run out of that 4-man rush. And we already talked about the gaps in a 4-man rush and what they can do. So, yeah, you give these guys the ability to run the ball with a great offensive line and that kind of pass protection. I don't know how defensively you stop that. I just don't. And I don't think many teams do. Now, it may be methodical because you're going to run the ball, but then you add in that element of a running quarterback. It almost seems unfair. there are times you go, if you're playing defense, like, coach, what do you want me to do? Come on, what do you want me to do? I can't RPO, so now I got to play the run game and then I got to drop back underneath this thing. And if I do, he hands it off. And if he doesn't hand it off, the quarterback keeps it. It takes the one negative about that approach is it takes so long. 10 plays in the NFL, they're going to throw at least one flag for holding. It's like when you return kickoffs, I'm not sure I would ever return kickoffs, because 1 in 3 is going to have a holding call and you're going to be back inside your own 20-yard line, right? So all those things come into play, and that's part of the strategy, but it's fun to watch how this game goes. I can remember back in the day when everybody was playing zone defense and then they started playing man-to-man, and then Dan Marino went out and got his 2 great receivers and it's like, oh, forget that. We can't bump and run those 2 guys, so it just always changes. It always does.
I don't know if you ever heard this. We came up with an idea that offensive and defensive linemen have to wear mittens so they can't hold. What do you think?
Mittens?
Mittens. They
like those things with the.
Yeah, you can't hold.
All right. Can I take it the opposite direction?
Sure.
Okay. I think holding should be at most a 5-yard penalty. Like, what are we doing
Why don't we make it legal?
Why don't we make it legal? Can you imagine how much fun it would be if offensive linemen could tackle defensive linemen? So what's the entire point of the game? The entire point of the game is we want more points and we want quarterbacks alive, right? If you said, what are the 2 most important things that the NFL does in all their rules and all the different things? Protect the quarterback, because when you've got a 3rd-string quarterback in December going against a 2nd-string quarterback on Sunday Night Football, it's not a whole lot of fun, right? So we're trying to protect the quarterbacks, right? And so what better way to do that than to allow holding, or if they do hold, it's only a 5-yard penalty so that it's not 2nd and 20 and, warm up the punt team. Let's keep alive the possibility that they can still convert that. And a 10-yard penalty for what? For protecting the quarterback? I mean, come on. And then the other thing that's come up now is they're penalizing the heck out of those tackles for taking a half step off the ball. Okay, that's okay if that's what you guys want to enforce, but what's going to happen? More quarterbacks are going to get hit. There's a reason those tackles are standing a half yard off the ball so they can have a better chance against those monster edge players that are freaks of nature when you watch this game anymore. And so are we trying to protect the quarterback? Well, then give them that half step. Are we trying to protect the quarterback? Well, let's let them hold a little bit. All right. If we're trying to protect the quarterback, well, even if they do hold, it's only a 5-yard penalty.
I love it. More from Cris coming up Sunday night with Mike Tirico. That'll be the Chiefs and the Falcons. Great to see you again, Cris. Thank you.
Good to see you, buddy.
All right, we'll take a break. Coming up, Jeff Passan from the Mothership on Shohei Ohtani's season. And how can a team be this bad? The Chicago White Sox.